When the economy enters a crisis, politicians rush to the rescue. But once the crisis fades and the economy stabilizes, that urgency disappears. No one wants to be the person who hits the brakes. Pumping money into the system through tax cuts or government spending is called expansionary fiscal policy. Cooling the economy down through tax hikes or spending cuts is contractionary policy. Politically, that contractionary medicine is poison. During massive shocks like the 2008 financial crisis or the 2020 pandemic lockdowns, stepping in isn't just a choice, it's a requirement to keep the financial system from collapsing. Both major political parties agree that government intervention is necessary. Where they immediately collide is how to execute that rescue. They demand completely different tools. The refusal to compromise on these rescue mechanisms drives the broken US budget, the strained safety net, and escalating global trade wars. The Democratic approach to expansionary policy relies heavily on the spending lever. The strategy is to stimulate demand by putting government funds straight into the hands of citizens who will spend it quickly. This chart shows federal expenditures on income security programs. The lines tracking the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or food stamps, and housing assistance illustrate the massive financial scale required for this type of direct intervention. Recently, this strategy expanded even further. The Biden administration's expanded child tax credit functioned like a monthly grant deposited directly into families' bank accounts to guarantee immediate consumer spending. Conservatives point out the frictions in this approach. They argue that massive entitlement spending risks creating a poverty trap, where earning more income at a job means losing government benefits, penalizing those who try to enter the workforce while draining the federal budget. For Democrats, ensuring immediate, localized citizen demand and providing a baseline standard of living is worth the trade-off of long-term budgetary strain. The Republican Playbook flips the equation. Instead of increasing government spending, their primary lever for economic expansion is reducing government revenue through tax cuts. The conservative logic is that money left in the private sector is more efficient. By lowering the tax burden, capital that would have gone to the government is instead diverted into private investment, business expansion, and hiring new workers. Liberal critics argue that this relies on an unproven assumption that wealth will trickle down to workers. They argue these cuts widen the wealth gap and intentionally starve the safety net of the revenue it needs to survive. Ultimately, the conservative lever prioritizes private market freedom and corporate growth, betting that a rising economic tide is better than a government-managed safety net. Pacing slows slowly. When the economy stabilizes and it is time to pay the bill, lawmakers freeze. Democrats refuse to cut their social spending, and Republicans refuse to raise taxes. Neither side will swallow the other's contractionary medicine. In October 2013, this ideological gridlock reached a breaking point. With no agreement on a budget, the federal government shut down, furloughing hundreds of thousands of workers and locking the gates to federal facilities. House Republicans refused to raise the national debt limit unless legislation included provisions to defund the Affordable Care Act, a major Democratic spending program. Democrats held their ground, pushing the country within days of defaulting on its debt. To resolve these bitter stalemates without forcing tax hikes or spending cuts, the government relies on a mathematical workaround. It borrows the difference from the public and foreign nations by selling U.S. Treasury bonds. This relentless cycle, borrowing cash to avoid the political pain of compromise, is what drives the U.S. national debt to GDP ratio to historic highs. When domestic tools for expansion, like tax cuts or social spending, are stalled by this gridlock, politicians look for a third option that doesn't require a budget compromise. This is where trade protectionism comes in, a way to deliver a win to their base without needing to find a single dollar of new revenue or a single spending cut. In 2009, President Obama approved a tariff increase on Chinese tires. This action prioritized unionized tire manufacturing workers, protecting a core Democratic base while bypassing the budget debate entirely. Years later, President Trump utilized massive tariff hikes on a wide range of Chinese goods. His goal was sheltering domestic manufacturers from foreign competition, protecting the Republican base through a policy that didn't require congressional approval or budget trade-offs. Their domestic playbooks are exact opposites, but both parties readily weaponize international trade barriers as an alternative to the political deadlock at home. Time is quickly running out on this political game, and the deadline is purely mathematical. The massive baby boomer generation is rapidly reaching retirement age. By 2030, 1 in 5 Americans will be over 65. This top-heavy shift exponentially increases mandatory spending for Medicare and Social Security, overwhelming payroll taxes. Combined with a soaring national debt, our savings rate declines, leaving less capital for the private sector to grow. The United States is entering a reality where it can no longer afford to run pure expansionary fiscal policy. The math no longer supports borrowing our way out of political gridlock. Managing the national debt, fixing the safety net, and navigating global trade are battlegrounds of political identity. Until lawmakers are willing to rewrite their partisan playbooks, the American economy will remain trapped in the crossfire.